what point do you advise to go in for adoption?
Namita, adoption is special. Your biological child comes from your womb. Your adopted child comes from your heart.
You always hear about parents waiting forever, 3-4 years.
We registered ourselves on the CARA portal. So you are number 695.
What about girl versus boy?
There are more girls in the system than there are boys.
So I can show you my messenger where probably 5 people have tried to approach me. आपको बच्चा मिल गया है क्या?
How do they find out?
Because we are part of adoption groups. The child was there for 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. Suddenly one day you have police on your door saying that, oh, this was a case of illegal trafficking.
After adoption, what was the emotional journey?
I wonder sometimes, like, would it have been any different? Is it any different? Before you know it, you realize you're in love.
Hi everybody, this is Namita Thapar, Executive Director of MCure Pharmaceuticals, and today we're going to be talking about a very emotional topic, adoption. Last time when I spoke about surrogacy, I got a lot of comments of, hey, we want to learn more about adoption, and rightfully so. Let's look at the statistics. There are 30 million orphans in our country. Officially, there are about 33,000 parents waiting to adopt every year, yet only 4,000 get adopted. So to talk on this very interesting topic, we have our lovely gynae. This is your 4th episode with us, Doc. Dr. Nozer Sheriar, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We have Parul, who has adopted a child, and we have Tara. And Parul, you've come all the way from Bangalore. Tara, you've flown from Delhi. And I know both your bachas are unwell today, and you've still kept your commitment of being here because you believe in the cause, you believe in spreading more information, educating and inspiring. So I'm so grateful for you showing up today.
For having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's start with Doctor. Doctor, I want to understand from a medical practitioner's perspective, at what point do you advise your patients to go in for adoption?
So, Namita, adoption is special. I once heard that someone said, your biological child comes from your womb. Your adopted child comes from your heart.
Oh, beautiful.
I have 3 different types of patients who adopt. One, and I've got a patient of mine whose daughters are both in their 20s, who adopted out of choice. I remember her coming to me in panic one day, thinking she might be pregnant and saying, I can't have this pregnancy, I already have 2 daughters. The second is a few patients who have one biological child and have decided that the second one will be adopted. And then there is the large group of patients, parents, who are very keen to have a child, but for some reason are unable to do so. Now, this has to come into options very early. So when I talk to couples who come to me for fertility, depending upon degree of difficulty, I'll start off by saying the usual stuff that we try and plan your cycles, then we go for a procedure called intrauterine insemination, and then you could go for an assisted reproduction and IVF. And what then? Well, then your options are, if you don't have good eggs, you can go for a donor egg, which incidentally is half an adoption.
Right, absolutely.
And
Right.
you could go for surrogacy, which incidentally is kind of an adoption. And then you also have to put adoption on that list. And the last thing, of course, I would say, which is only fair, is tell them it's okay for someone not to have children if they don't want to.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they need to hear this from their doctor. If a couple is having challenges and they've now decided to move to a higher level, my advice to them is go get yourself registered for an adoption early. It's a long process. You can then go on with your treatments, and if your treatment succeeds, you are perfectly within your rights to get off the list. And if it doesn't, you've already moved up, way up on that list, and that's something our co-panelists can tell us about so that they can have that baby sooner rather than later.
But that's very smart advice because instead of sequential, what you're saying is if you do it simultaneous, it saves you a lot of time. And talking about time is a great segue to Tara, you're a lawyer, in addition to, having adopted your children. And I really want you to touch upon the process as well as the legal elements, the good and the bad. Because the biggest problem right now is there's not enough information on, exactly what you need to do. And second is you always hear about parents waiting forever, 3-4 years. What can be done to make it a faster process?
Yeah, so information is actually a huge black hole when it comes to adoption. So I'll start with our journey, my husband and I, and segue into the legality of the process. So we registered ourselves on the CARA portal. You have to go online and you have to open an account in the Carings portal. I think it was January 2019, we were on a wait list. After that, you have to have a home study. So you choose your agency. They come home, they ask you a few questions, they see your surroundings, they see who's in the house, and if you have a biological child already, they take their consent. And once they upload your home study report, it's a go. So you are number 695 as we were on the wait list at the time. Really? And then you kind of begin this interminable wait, which you don't know what's happening. It's, you kind of go about living your life. In some cases, you try to get pregnant in the meantime. And then finally, you realize that you've come to 100 or 200, and that's when it starts to kind of...
Is there a certain timeline by when you can move from, like, your case, 600s to 100s?
So the really disturbing thing about it is when we registered, we were told, between 1 to 2 years is the wait. Right. And by the time 2 years passed, it had become 3 years. And now I'm hearing from people who registered later than us that it's more like 4 years. Right. And the number of children in the pool is really dwindling because you mentioned about 3 crore children. So now 3 crore children may be orphan, abandoned, in need of care and protection, or in the system more generally, but not all of them are available for adoption.
Why not?
So there's something called an adoption inquiry that has to be conducted by the Child Welfare Committee to declare a child legally free for adoption. Okay. And there's kind of attrition at every level. So from the time a child is identified, put in the custody of a home, appears before the CWC, cleared for adoption, and then enters the CARA portal for adoption. At every stage, there's some amount of attrition and delay. And there are also children who fall through black holes. I work with children who are victims of sexual crimes. I've not seen even one of them being cleared for adoption, even when they don't have parents, for example, or otherwise children who are involved in legal cases. So there are children in that category, older children, siblings, etc. So somewhere along the way, when we started speaking with other adoptive parents and the community of prospective adoptive parents, of which Parul was, of course, a part, we realized that there are many ways to adopt. So you could adopt siblings. You could look at the special needs list. That's what it's called officially. I don't like to call it that myself, which has children who have hernias, vitamin D deficiencies, a hole in the heart, anything that a biological child could have as well. Of course, you have to see where your limits are, but special needs is by no means a category that anybody should ignore. And of course, hard to place children is another category, which is children who've been passed over multiple times for arbitrary reasons. Oh. So these are some of the other lists, so to speak, that appear in your portal, which might expedite the process if you are open to adopting children beyond the 0 to 2 perfect health, that sort of scenario. So if you look at these categories, you move up in the wait list faster, or you might find a child out of turn. And of course, siblings adoptions are dynamic. They can take a little bit longer or a little bit less.
I think in your case, when you changed your option from single kid to siblings, you moved up very quickly, right?
That's right.
There's a lovely blog written by you and your husband. I'm going to put that link on our channel, but I'd love to hear about that. And then we also heard about, Mandira Bedi spoke about how she specified 3 states, and then when she changed that to anywhere in India, she moved up fairly quickly too. So can you just talk a little bit about what you can do to move up?
So you have preferences. You can give preferences for the child you're adopting. So you can say you want to adopt 1 child or siblings. You can give an age range that can be 0 to 2, 2 to 4, all the way up to 18. You can specify the gender, and you can make a specification about state combinations. Now it has changed from when I registered. Now you can choose states, or you are automatically put into zones based on the address, your residential address, which is also controversial. But yes, so it's northeast, central, etc. Yeah. So that's how you move. You kind of can see your preferences. Now 0 to 2 is the category where most parents are registered. Most parents want a baby. So if you are open to adopting an older child, that's one situation in which it could be much less time.
And then you move up the ranks faster.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, the wait list itself would be much shorter.
Absolutely.
For example.
What about girl versus boy? I mean, there's a country that's obsessed with a boy child, right? Does that play into this list or the number of kids, who are up for adoption?
Yes, I think it takes longer if you select male. I think possibly because fewer children are being given up for adoption. Fewer male children are being given up for adoption, but that's conjecture. I can't say for sure.
Right.
But yes, there are more girls in the system than there are boys.
And also, a couple of quick things on the process. Even after you adopt, there's a follow-through process, right?
Yeah.
How long does that go on for, and what exactly does that entail? Is it disruptive or is it pretty seamless?
So in our case, it didn't take place. We kept following up with CARA to come and
So
and
you
have
never
a
came
visit,
and
have a
followed
chat.
up?
Yeah, they never came
Because
and followed
legally,
up.
they're supposed to come.
Yes, it's supposed to be 4 times
okay.
at 6-month intervals. So for 2 years.
Okay, so and then after 2 years it stops. And
After
in
2
your
years, it's
case,
all
they didn't
done.
just never came, even though you were following up.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, just one last question before we move to Parul. If you put on your lawyer hat, right? What are the 2 or 3 things we can change in the system to just make the process faster? Because 4 years on average just seems like a very long time for anyone to wait.
I think, I know that the time is very painful for a lot of parents. 4 years seems like a long time, but it's quite standard around the world. I think to focus on the wait time is not necessarily the best thing. I think we have to focus on what is best for the children in the process. So I think there are a lot of preconceived notions around adoptive children versus biological children. Dispelling some of that, I think, may actually help parents who are otherwise waiting for a very long time. For instance, I mentioned the special needs list. I also, think that there is a lot more that could be done to bring more children into the system. For instance, we have shelters operating which are not actually registered under the CARA system. So the children there actually are again in a black hole. There's also, I think funding is one of those things that needs to come in from the ministry into CARA. There need to be more people sitting at desks in that department.
And the funding is for what reason? For making sure that the pending cases get sorted out faster? What would the funding be used for?
I'll give you an example of the kinds of delays that can happen. So in our case, one of our kids had a hole in the heart. She was born with a hole in the heart, and she had, various illnesses when she was a baby. So at the first time, they came to us when they were 3.5, but they were in the system since almost 0. And one of the reasons they weren't adopted earlier is because a set of parents had complained that they were referred special needs children in the normal category, and their profile was put on hold until their health status could be verified, and that took about 1.5 years. So our babies were unnecessarily in a shelter home, deprived of individual care for an extra period of potentially 1 year or so.
And you're
So
saying
shame
the
on
funding
the parents
could
who
have gone
reject it.
towards their health,
So for instance,
assessment and verification?
Yes. So in expediting, it takes bodies, it takes labor to be able to rush these cases and to give it due attention, and then to, make sure that
That's
kind
a great
of thing
point.
doesn't
You're
happen.
saying funding and focus from a perspective of having more bodies and more people looking at getting more kids in, cutting some of these, like you said, the healthcare needs and all of that, and expediting the process.
Exactly.
I think that's fabulous. Parul, let's go on to you. You adopted your child the same time as 2019. And once you got here, I realized the two of you know each other. And it's beautiful the way you explain how you know each other. It's through the support group. And in fact, Tara, you've written about this in your blog that you didn't realize that the support groups, the Facebook and the WhatsApp communities can be such a huge source of support. So I want you to talk about that. And then I want you to put on your journalist hat and tell me some hard-hitting facts and honesty about some practices that can be improved in the country.
I started my adoption journey in 2019 like Tara, and I think for good 1.5 years we were sort of like any other parent, sitting quietly, waiting and everything. And then suddenly 2020 COVID hits and the delay is sort of in your face. And you realize that something somewhere is not right, like the statistics you mentioned. Absolutely. And as a journalist, something that was also sort of hitting me badly was that how come I don't know about these things? How come these questions are still unanswered even for a person like me who has read so much? When I'm reading so much about my stories every day, why is something not related to this coming up? So then that's when, I entered the group, and Tara was already in that group. And when I started seeing the, the desperation in the parents and, the way they were very, very sort of bothered about the wait, I realized that it's not something that has just one aspect. There are multiple dimensions to it. And literally, these communities that exist on WhatsApp and Facebook are the lifeline of
How
for the
wonderful.
adoptive parents. Tara mentioned about this whole information black hole. Unfortunately, when you register with CARA in India, until the time you get your baby, you're practically almost not in touch with them. Nobody calls you ever. Nobody tells you ever what's happening. You are the one who's calling helplines. None of them are answered. And a lot has changed in last 3.5 years because so basically after I got into those groups, I realized that probably these questions need to be asked. And that's when we started getting united, and I formed Adoption Action Group, which was basically a forum for parents to ask these questions to the ministry. We did a signature campaign. We heard back from the CEO of CARA. She sort of called us for a meeting and just to understand what was bothering us. But what I'm trying to say is that the communities are filling a information gap. They are doing a lot. But a lot more needs to be done from the government side because parents are not trained counselors, Absolutely. Parents are not people who can give you actual information. Parents are not sometimes the right sort of go-to forum to literally understand the nitty-gritties of a case, where you're stuck, how you should move about. The problem right now, like Tara mentioned, yes, the delay is a graving concern for us as parents, but what do you do and how do you overcome that time, or how do you basically face that time of 4 years? How much more you can be prepared for a child in those 4 years, especially if you're choosing to become a parent through adoption, where the child comes with a little bit of trauma. There are a lot of things to be handled. Nobody's thinking about these things. So as parents, that is what concerns us. One of the other things that I realized only when I started interacting more with the community is, and when I became active in these groups more, especially the Facebook groups and Instagram, I realized that this delay has actually had a very, very sort of ironical impact on illegal adoptions becoming rampant. You will not believe, you will probably hardly find any adoptive parent who's never been approached by a trafficker. It is that rampant. Yes. So I can show you my Facebook feed, where, like my messenger, where probably 5 people have tried to approach me. Aapko bacha mil gaya hai kya? And
My
that's
God.
when they can go and check on my Facebook profile that I'm a journalist. I'm probably not the right person to approach.
And how do they find out that you're...
Because we are part of adoption groups. So, it's
so
a
they are
Facebook group, it's a
traffickers
community.
scouting
Yes.
and then approaching
So,
you.
unfortunately, the problem is because these Facebook groups are the only go-to for parents, they come here and they become a very well-knit, strong community. They are sort of sharing everything. They're asking questions. Oh, I am desperately waiting. It's been 3 years. Those are the parents who are the, right target. They are the most vulnerable ones. And we have seen cases, and I have myself reported many of these cases to NCPCR. And we do see some action. It's not that the authorities are not listening at all, but the scale at which this needs to be addressed is huge.
What are some of the, bad things, for lack of better word, that are happening because of this trafficking?
So
one is the cost, of course.
Yes.
Adoption typically is about 50,000 rupees. But if you go with the trafficker, I'm sure they're charging you, probably a lot more than that.
Yeah, but see, it's not just about the cost. The thing is, there is a child involved here, and so if you basically read about a lot of decoy operations have happened in last few months, where, these sting operations being done, traffickers were trapped. Policemen, basically, they tried to sort of this thing. Right. If you read those stories and if you read those sort of accounts, you will gradually get to know that it's ultimately the child and the parents who fell for it who are the ultimate sufferers. A child who is probably born for this, or maybe was trafficked by one of the parents, literally sometimes the parents are involved, is put into a family which is loving. They can literally do anything for that child. The child was there for 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. Suddenly, one day, you have police on your door saying that, oh, this was a case of illegal trafficking. We placed everything for you. Take back the child, put them in CWC. You think that a 5-year-old does not have trauma? They do have. So that is basically the cause of concern. So as adoptive parents, whenever we speak of delays, whenever we speak of a reform in the entire system, it's not that we are saying that give us children ASAP. What we're trying to say is that you need to make the system smooth and just for everyone. Parents are a very important stakeholder of this process. So, so that's basically where things need to change.
No, I think this is such
safe surrender. I think we hardly know about.
Mean?
So safe surrender basically is you all these abandoned children who are found on these different harsh conditions, and we read these news stories every day, they need to come to the agencies and the institutes when they are being left. There has to be so much awareness, there has to be so much vigilance. When the child line is being called, there has to be someone to pick up that call and basically help someone. There are instances, because we work with CWC members sometimes closely. Of course, again, as volunteers, because I am just an adoptive mother and I'm trying to learn the nitty-gritties of the system to help other parents. The calls are not answered. Maybe there is an unwed mother who's trying to place the child in the secure environment. If you don't answer that call, that child will probably be found somewhere. So the reason we have so many special needs kids in childcare institutes is because these kids have been left in harsh conditions in these circumstances. So why not get them before they have suffered, so that you can place them in loving families? Is something that needs to be done.
I mean, you're so right. I mean, you go to railway stations, you go to these places, you see abandoned kids all the time. And if a mother is trying to place that abandoned kid and nobody's answering the helpline, there's a parent who wants to adopt who's not getting the kid. The kid is, like you said, abandoned, probably going through a lot of trauma, mental and physical health conditions.
Yes.
And there's just chaos because that helpline didn't answer that call. It's as
There are
simple as
no
that.
mass scale awareness programs for this. Like, suicide prevention, how did that happen? Why do we see media reports carrying a line always when there is a reporting of suicide? We see that now happening. And this is a consistent effort. Why can't we do that for safe surrender? Why can't every such news carry a tagline saying that this is how you report?
Parul, as educated as I am, and I try to read as much as I can, I did not know about this concept of safe surrender and the helpline being unmanned. And I think it also comes down to, again, your passion, journalism, more information and more people talking about it. And I think that's been the biggest bottleneck, that we do not talk about these things. Coming to you now, I know you mentioned about the Hindu law having its own mechanism for adoption other than the CARA. I want you to just touch upon that briefly. I also want you to talk about what has been your experience now for the emotional part in parents who have adopted and then they've come to you and explained their journeys. Have you seen good and the bad, or there's only good? And what are some of the challenges they face?
So first I'll talk about the experience. And the experience has been only good. Challenging sometimes, but good. I've had parents telling me, thank God we didn't have a kid before this because we could adopt this child of ours. Concerns that you raised earlier about family and genetics. The first thing I tell my patients is, I've seen patients for many years, and nurture beats nature every time. These children start looking like their parents. The mannerisms are like the mother. In fact, they do come from some insecurities, so they cling to the mother a lot more than another child. And for me, I think it's a win-win situation. When I tell a couple, everyone wins. The parents who wanted this child win, the child wins, and that unfortunate person who had to give up the child also wins, though she doesn't know she just won. So that's it. Sometimes, as a doctor, you need to give a couple something to kind of grasp.
Yeah.
And I tell them how all humanity is very closely related genetically. Seriously. There's science which says that we all started from East Africa just about 50 or 60,000 years ago. And believe it or not, research has shown, and this is not Adam and Eve, that when you looked at the mitochondrial DNA in the woman and the Y chromosomal in the male, there is really one quintessential male and female in East Africa at that time to whom we are all related. So technically we are all related. Yeah. I mean, all these differences we have amongst us, that's ridiculous. So it's only been win-win. I just hope it could be more efficient. I just wish it could take less time, not just for these parents who are waiting, but for those children who are waiting. Absolutely. In situations when they could be in a loving environment. Very so that's that. I learned something today. And I think a lot of doctors would learn if they watch this show, as we always thought that adoption is only for Hindus. And the other communities had their own personal laws. So if you were to take up a child, it would be a ward, and then you'd have to actually have a will. Otherwise, the family could challenge and take it all away. And Tara just educated me and says, if you go through CARA, that does not apply because that overrides your personal law. And that's amazing. That's amazing. So for people who thought differently, think differently, please educate yourself about this legal nuance that if you adopt a child through CARA, no matter who you be, Muslim, Parsi, Christian, your child is your child in every sense of the word, including inheriting everything that's yours.
That's wonderful because, CARA, we spoke about what things need to change, but there's some positives too. So this is one of the positives that he's highlighted. I want to talk to the two of you because, a big part of this show is also, talking about your personal journey. So after adoption, what was the emotional journey like? So we'll start with you, Tara. We can go on to Parul. Like, just walk me through how it felt. What were the challenges? What were the joys? Explain to me.
I could go on for like 3 hours about
Yeah, of
this.
course, it's your baby.
It's my
we all
babies,
can go
yeah.
on forever when it's about our
Exactly.
babies.
So my husband, he's a cautious person. He didn't want to commit. When we got those little pictures in our inbox, he didn't want to say too much because I'm like, chalo, abhi le lo, like we have to go right now.
Yeah.
So he tells me that he basically fell in love immediately. He went, he saw the pictures, he was in love. We went to the home, he was in love. I was practical. I was like, biscuit leke jana hai. We have to give them something in their hand, otherwise how will they sort of come to us? So that sort of thing. So I think it came a little slower for me.
Yeah.
And the emotional aspect was actually quicker for him. And then you just, before you know it, you realize you're in love. And
So sweet.
I wonder sometimes, like, would it have been any different? Is it any different? And then something happens to remind me that, gosh, I don't think, I remember this expression on my mother's face, what I'm feeling right now. So I can tell. So the social anxieties when they start school and all of those things.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of concern in the beginning to form that bond and attachment for the kids' sake.
Right.
One of the early things I remember was, we had a dog and we kept a bowl on the ground for the dog to drink water. And one of the babies went and washed her hands in it. And I said, no. And it was just day 2 or 3 and I, only said that much. And her face just fell. And we'd been having a good day till then. But they'd basically been abducted 2 days prior to that.
Right.
And then they did something innocuous for which they were told off. And so small things like that just remind you that you really have to work with another person in the context that they're coming from and absorbing into your context. And in the end, I think they adopt you. You don't adopt
I love
anything.
that part in your blog where you spoke about how initially, like you said, they were sensitive, they were cautious. And then slowly the negotiation part that every kid does with the parents started till where they started getting their way, right? So I thought that you explained beautifully. And that just showed the journey of how they started with that caution, being ultra sensitive. And then now it's like, hey, they're bullying you all the way like any child would to a
So
parent.
recently we watched Dangal together as a family. And there's a scene where, Amir Khan is forcing his daughters to exercise. Yes. And my daughters were looking at it horrified. And I've been trying to get one of them to go for runs with me. And I said, so agar main tumko aise train karungi, if I try to train you like this, will you do it? And they said, no. Bilkul bhi nahi.
Absolutely not.
So we have arrived.
You have reached that point of complete comfort and ease. Yeah. How beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Tara. Parul, let's hear from you.
So I think adoption for me was always the first choice. Yeah. And nothing against parents who try so much to conceive and do everything in the world. But I find it hard to connect to that bit of it, because for me it was always a natural choice and it has never occurred to me how it could be different. So I always wanted it this way. And I also believe very strongly that parenting is hard, this way or that way. So with adoption, there could be a little bit of added challenges sometimes, because you have to keep the nuances in mind. You have to keep the time. The child could take a little bit of time to sink in, especially if they are slightly older age group, 8+, 9+. But in my experience and whatever I have interacted with the community in last 2-3 years, I feel that there is no fixed box to say that, okay, if this is adoption, this is how it is going to be. Unfortunately, the public perception of people outside, or the general anxiety before adoption, is that, oh my God, they're going to take time, the bonding will be, okay, will a 2-month-old bond faster than a 7-year-old? It doesn't it cannot be in a box. It doesn't work like that. A 7-year-old could literally gel into the family in a few months.
no formula.
Yes, there's no formula to it. A 2-month-old probably, if comes with a very difficult birth history or whatever trauma they've got in the womb, could take time and things could. So if you are ready for parenting in general, you are ready for adoption. There's no different bracket that you need to this thing. Of course, there's a process part of it. There's a scrutiny part of it. The second thing I would like to say is adoption is child-centric. It is not about finding the right child for the parent. It is about finding the right parents, the right family for the child.
Oh, how beautifully said.
So,
Yeah,
so you have to keep that in mind when you're. So if you are okay with these two brackets, you are ready to become parents.
My God, that is so beautifully said. I think we've captured a lot. We've captured the legal, the process, the emotional, the medical, anything that I've not covered because this is such a vast topic and so little is known about it. Is there anything, any parting words that any three of you would like to say? What's something I may have missed in my questions?
So people sometimes worry about, the husband and wife or the partners are ready, but what about the family? And I can tell you again from what I've been told that there may be resistance, but it's not about them, it's about this couple or this person and that child. But the amazing thing is once that child gets into the family, it wins everyone over in record time. And this is what I've been told time and again when grandparents have their reservations and issues, but that little one goes home and in just no time, that child becomes the most special thing in everyone's life.
Oh my God, you really touched my heart with that. Well, that very, very beautifully said. And that's what kids do. Yes, Tara.
Just want to add one thing. So, also adoption is not just for, cis hetero families. Adoption is open to all kinds of family formulations. Single men, single women can adopt. Single men and single women in any kind of situations can adopt and in any kind of relationships. So I just want to put that out there because there's a perception that you have to be straight or you have to be in a marital relationship. That's not the case. And children flower beautifully in families of choice and of all kinds of families of choice.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that because that's a very important point. I mean, there is no ideal family. A family is one that can give the child the love that he or she deserves. Anything, Parul, that you may want to add?
The last thing would be there are a lot of people, like for example, when my community got to know that we've adopted and we declared our son's homecoming, the first, we also wanted to adopt always. This is the first question. This is the first sort of statement that comes out from everybody across. And so, okay, that's not bad. Probably they really wanted to. But what I want to say is that the community is there. You have ample amount of, information available if you do a little bit of deep research. Unfortunately, it is not probably available in the right ways from CARA, but just read up about it. There are support groups available. Get the right information and make yourself aware because it's literally the most beautiful thing that can be done.
Oh, wow.
And that can happen to you.
So lovely. We always want our episodes to educate because like they all said, there is misinformation, there is lack of information. But we also wanted to touch our hearts to inspire. And the way they have, all three of them, spoken about their journeys, it just leaves you with this warm, fuzzy feeling. And the words, Dr. Sheriar is more of a poet than a doctor, I always tell him. I love the two words he used. It's not about just nature, it's about nurture, right? And so if you can really match a child who wants love to a family, like Tara said, whatever form that family may be in, that wants to give that love. There cannot be, like Parul said, a more beautiful journey. If anything at all, let's get educated. Let's spread a lot of information. Let's spread a lot of success stories so that we can inspire more and more people to understand, to learn, to adopt. And if they don't adopt, then to support the families and the children who are adopted. That's what we call an inclusive India. And let's hope that today's episode has brought us at least a few steps closer to that vision. Thank you very much.